It was Einstein who said that imagination is more important than knowledge. He understood that our greatest discoveries and most profound works of art have come to us through imagination and play. Far from being idle daydreaming, the fantasies of childhood build the foundation for all higher learning. Hello, I'm Kitty Hilton, and we're going to explore imagination and play with Joseph Chilton Pearce. He's the author of 6 books, including Crack in the Cosmic Egg, his national bestseller, The Magical Child, and most recently, Evolution's End. Joe considers play to be one of nature's highest achievements. He describes it as the freedom to move beyond the limitations we have accepted for ourselves and to discover and develop something new. He's convinced that nature has a plan for the unfoldment of new capacities, and play is essential if we are to discover our full potential. So let's join Joseph Chilton Pearce and a group of parents, educators, and healthcare professionals as they examine imagination and play.
The dictionary defines imagination as the ability to create images not present to the sensory system. Literally, that's it right there in the dictionary. What does that mean? All right, let's go back to that triune brain again. Here's that sensory system bringing in its messages about the physical world. Here's the emotional cognitive system, and of course it sends it on up to the great system up here. Now, if the image is not presented through the physical world process, through our senses, the image can be created up here. See, Richard Restock was the medical doctor's name, slipped me a while ago. Richard Restock said, you can come in higher up the evolutionary stream and the whole image process is there. If it's not present to the eyes here, it's present to the inner eyes of the mind. And that's the great capacity of imagination. If we knew the critical nature of imagination, how it's the very core, the very foundation of all higher stages of learning and intellectual life, we would certainly look at the child differently. Let's try to approach this from starting back. I would say, first of all, that play is the major intelligence of the first 7 years and even the first 11 years of life. Let's look, again, we'll put up our birth, age 1, age 4, 7, and 11, and we're going to put 15 for now, as our major developmental stages. Regardless of whether you agree with all the Piagetian content for that stages, we do know those stages are biologically unfolding at those times. Then let's go back and look at the effect on the brain's sensory motor body system from the 7th month in utero. What happens? From the 7th month in utero, before the child is born, every time the mother uses a word, each phoneme of the word, and we're talking about vibrations, a word's just a vibration of sound, each vibration, we call a phoneme, brings about what? A muscular response in the infant. So from the very beginning, there's this intimate connection between body movement, the brain, and its word structure, and its formation of word structures. By the time the child is born in the world, this is myelinated, it's locked in as a permanent thing. We then have a cessation of real verbal action for quite a while. In the first few months, what we call the in-arms period, the eyes have it. Things aren't auditory half so much as they're visual in those first few months. Why? Because we couldn't develop vision in utero, and so the first few months immediately after they're out, everything is visual to that child. They're looking, absorbing enormous amounts about their visual world. Around 6 to 12 months, we have what Piaget called object constancy. He was wrong in his idea of what was happening, but he was right that it does take place. The child's visual world simply suddenly stabilizes. We know this is brought about by myelination of the long axons involved in all sorts of other maturation processes in the sensory fields of the brain, the auditory fields, and the visual fields of the brain. They stabilize, they mature enough so that this total entrainment of locked in on the visual process is no longer needed around somewhere around the first year of life. That's when we shift into the great limbic structure, and this emotional child appears and so on, and language and walking appear. Now, let's look at the growth of language itself and the relationship between word and thing. I loved the work of Blurton Jones, working with Tinbergen, the Nobel laureate, in the cross-cultural study of the pointing syndrome. When a little child's in their own nest, they think anything is safe to interact with. And just watch it. A child in a house, anything, they'll just jump right in on it. They want to taste it, touch it, smell it, feel it, and immediately say, "Was that Mama? Was that Daddy?" They are asked that famous question that comes up, "Was that Mama? Was that Daddy?" is asking for a name label for the object. Now, when you give them a name, that word for a thing, the word and the thing build into the brain as a single neural pattern, as a neural field network. The brain doesn't build a neural network of the thing, its taste, touch, smell, feel, and quality, all of that, and then in addition add to it its name as though that's a separate item. The name builds in as an integral part of the whole structure of knowledge, as Piaget calls it. A structure of knowledge is a neural pattern that results from the child's interaction with an object or an event of his physical world out there. And the brain responds by creating those particular neural fields that can handle that kind of phenomena and the way those fields interact with all the other fields. And the name and the thing build as a single unit. We call this concrete language, where the word doesn't stand for the thing. Semanticists, you see, are quite right about much later speech, but here the word doesn't stand for the thing. The word and the thing are the same to the early child. Ask the 2-year-old child to say the word hand, they move their hand when they say it. Why? Because hand means something very tangible, something very concrete. They can't deal with abstractions at all. Now, when you take the child out in the open, away from the nest, all mammalian animals respond the same way. I think this is so fascinating. When you take the child out in the open, and Jones did cross-cultural studies of this. Here's the mama and the child. The child spots an object out here. Let's say it's a dirty, nasty old dog. That's my favorite one. The child will stop. If they've never seen one before, they stop, point toward the object, and silently turn around and stare at the caretaker, whoever it is, grandmama, papa, mama, whoever it is, and wait for some kind of a signal from the parent that they perceive this particular kind of an object. Getting that, the child interacts with the object, taste it, touch it, smell it, feel it, talk to it, etc., and build what we call a sensory motor structure of knowledge of that object. And of course, immediately want to know, was that mama? Unless mama tells the child ahead of time. Now, let's suppose that it's a dirty, nasty, awful-looking old mongrel dog. Mama says, "Don't dare touch that dirty, nasty, mongrel old dog." Now, her acknowledgement of the dog is all the child needs. This is the model imperative again. The child must receive some kind of verification that the mother is interacting and perceiving this object. In that case, the child rushes over to interact with the dirty, nasty old dog. Mama saying don't hasn't anything to do with it. The child is impelled. They're driven by nature to interact with the object and build a structure of knowledge of it. Now, the mother's emotional state of that, of horror, alarm, etc., builds into the structure of knowledge as an integral part of it. Her name for the object, dirty, nasty old dog, is built into the structure of knowledge. All that is without any evaluation on the part of the child. If it's a beautiful flower and the mother smiles and the child rushes over to do what? To pull it off its stem, stuff it in its mouth, taste it, touch it, smell it, feel it, and so on. Then it builds the mother's emotional state of approval into the structure of knowledge of that, along with the word flower. Now, this might seem a little bit extreme. Let me interject at this point one of the most interesting phenomena that Blurton Jones found. And that was what he called the hallucinatory capacity of the early child. He found in so many hundreds of cases in his observations over years all over the world in which the child would point toward an object that he couldn't see and that apparently the mother couldn't see.